The notification popped up on my phone at exactly 6 p.m. Family Zoom call, Sunday, November 19th, mandatory attendance. My sister Vanessa had added 3 exclamation points and a turkey emoji, which somehow made it feel less like an invitation and more like a summons. I stared at my office window overlooking downtown Austin, watching the sunset paint the skyline in shades of amber and rose, and felt my stomach twist into familiar knots. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Claire Patterson, and I'm about to sit through another family gathering where everyone will pity me for being a struggling freelance graphic designer who can barely make rent. The irony is so thick I could choke on it. Because right now, I'm sitting in the corner office of Streamline Digital Solutions, the company I co-founded 4 years ago. The company that just closed a 7-figure deal with 3 Fortune 500 clients. The company that made me a millionaire before I turned 30. But my family doesn't know any of that. As far as they're concerned, I'm their cautionary tale. The daughter who chose passion over stability. The sister who couldn't hack it in the real world. The family disappointment who lives in a cramped Baltimore studio apartment, eating ramen and chasing a dream that will never materialize. They have no idea that the Baltimore apartment is just a prop, a stage set I maintain for the rare occasions when someone threatens to visit. My real home is a beautifully renovated loft in South Congress, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, decorated with actual art I bought from local galleries instead of prints from Target. 20 minutes before the call, Marcus walked into my office. He's my business partner and the only person outside my therapist who knows about the elaborate fiction I've been maintaining. He looked at my face and immediately knew what I was thinking. "You don't have to do this," he said, not for the 100th time. "You could just tell them the truth." But Marcus doesn't understand what it's like to grow up in a family where love feels conditional, where acceptance is tied to meeting very specific expectations, where being different is treated like being defective. I logged into Zoom at exactly 6 p.m., because being late would just give Vanessa more ammunition. The gallery view populated with familiar faces. Mom and Dad sitting stiffly in their Richmond living room, the same formal setup they use for church directory photos. My older brother Tyler calling in from his car, probably escaping his own family obligations for 20 minutes. Vanessa and her husband Brad in what looked like a professionally staged home office, all perfectly arranged books and tasteful artwork, the kind of backdrop that screamed we have our lives together. "Hey Claire," Vanessa's voice cut through the general hellos with that particular tone she'd perfected over the years. Sweet on the surface, poison underneath. "Still in Baltimore? How's the freelancing going?" She emphasized freelancing the way someone might say plague or bankruptcy. Before I could answer, she continued. "Brad just got promoted to regional manager. We're thinking of upgrading to a bigger house. The market is crazy right now, but when you have stable income, you can actually plan for these things, you know?" I smiled, the same tight smile I'd been giving my family for 4 years. "That's great news, Vanessa. Congratulations, Brad." My screen showed exactly what I wanted them to see, a carefully curated background of my fake Baltimore apartment. IKEA furniture, blank walls, the universal aesthetic of someone just barely getting by. What they couldn't see was the corner of my real office, where my assistant Tessa had just left a stack of contracts on my desk, each one representing more money than Vanessa made in 6 months. Mom chimed in with her usual worried expression. "Claire, honey, we've been thinking. Your father and I. Maybe it's time to consider something more stable. Patricia's son just started at his firm, and they're always looking for administrative assistants. It's not glamorous, but it's steady." There it was. The weekly reminder that my life choices were wrong, that I needed rescuing, that being true to myself was less important than being safely employed in someone else's dream. I'd been preparing for this moment for 4 years, building a company in secret while maintaining an elaborate cover story. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday call, every concerned text message had been carefully managed with lies and misdirection. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that in exactly 7 minutes my entire fabricated reality was about to shatter. Because while I thought I was sharing my sad Baltimore apartment background, my screen sharing settings had other plans. And Vanessa, who was about to mock my career choices one more time, was about to get the shock of her life. The Patterson family dinners were never just dinners. They were performances, carefully orchestrated events where everyone played their assigned roles. I learned mine early. Be quiet, be agreeable, don't make waves. My sister Vanessa learned a different script entirely. Be loud, be accomplished, demand attention. And she'd been perfecting her performance for 29 years. Growing up in Richmond, our house was the kind of place where appearances mattered more than authenticity. Mom kept photo albums organized by year and event, each picture showing a family that looked perfect on paper. Dad worked 60-hour weeks at the accounting firm, coming home exhausted but always ready to enforce whatever rules Mom had established that week. Tyler, my older brother, escaped to college and never really came back, not emotionally anyway. He'd learned to ghost through family events with non-committal responses and early exits. But Vanessa and I were trapped in an endless competition I never wanted to be part of. She was 3 years younger, which somehow made her twice as aggressive about proving herself. When I made honor roll, she made principal's list. When I joined the debate team, she became captain. When I got into Virginia Commonwealth University, she got a full scholarship to University of Virginia. Every accomplishment of mine was just a benchmark for her to surpass. The real fracture happened when I was 23. I'd graduated with a degree in marketing and immediately landed a job at a prestigious advertising agency in Washington, D.C. It was everything my parents wanted for me. Stable salary, good benefits, impressive business cards. I should have been thrilled. Instead, I was miserable. The work felt soul-crushing, the office politics exhausting, the creative restrictions suffocating. I'd spend my lunch break sketching ideas in notebooks, dreaming about campaigns that actually meant something instead of selling products nobody needed. That's when I met Dr. Helen Briggs at a networking event. She was a professor of entrepreneurship at Georgetown, and she gave a talk about the difference between building a career and building a life. After her presentation, I approached her with shaking hands and told her I felt trapped. She looked at me with these piercing gray eyes and asked a question that changed everything. If failure wasn't possible, what would you build? The answer came immediately. I wanted to help small businesses compete with corporations. I wanted to use technology to level the playing field. I wanted to create something that mattered. Within 6 months, I'd quit my job, cashed out my small savings, and moved to Austin to start building what would eventually become Streamline Digital Solutions. I told my parents I was taking a temporary position to explore my options. I made it sound safe, provisional, reversible. Vanessa's reaction was immediate and vicious. She called me selfish, irresponsible, naive. She told anyone who would listen that I was throwing my life away, that I'd come crawling back within 6 months begging for help. Mom cried actual tears, not because she'd miss me but because she was embarrassed to tell her friends her daughter had quit a good job to chase some fantasy. Dad just looked disappointed, which somehow hurt worse than anger. The first year in Austin was brutal. I worked 18-hour days building the business from my tiny apartment, living on cheap tacos and cheaper coffee. I connected with Marcus through a startup accelerator program. He had the technical skills I lacked, and I had the business vision he needed. We complemented each other perfectly. But the business grew slowly, painfully slowly. There were months when I wasn't sure I could make rent, weeks when I survived on free samples from Whole Foods, days when Vanessa's predictions seemed prophetic. That's when the lying started. Not all at once, but gradually, like water wearing down stone. During a family call, Mom asked how things were going. I said fine but made it sound uncertain. Vanessa jumped on the uncertainty like a shark scenting blood. Having trouble finding clients? She asked sweetly. It's such a competitive field. I should have corrected her, should have explained that we were actually gaining traction. Instead, I let the assumption stand. It was easier than defending myself. Easier than proving something that shouldn't have needed proof. The lies became a protective layer. When Streamline landed its first major client, I told my family I'd picked up some freelance work. When we hired our first employee, I said I was still working alone. When we moved into actual office space, I maintained the fiction of working from home. Every success was minimized, every milestone hidden. Because I knew what would happen if I told the truth. Vanessa would find ways to diminish it. Mom would worry it wasn't stable enough. Dad would question my financial decisions. Their skepticism would poison my joy. So I created an alternate reality. I rented a studio apartment in Baltimore, close enough to Richmond that surprise visits were theoretically possible but far enough that they rarely happened. I furnished it with second-hand furniture and kept a few changes of clothes there. I made sure my social media showed only carefully curated glimpses of struggle. Coffee at cheap diners, walks in modest neighborhoods, complaints about difficult clients that didn't exist. Meanwhile, my real life flourished in secret. Streamline grew from 2 people to 45. We won industry awards I couldn't tell anyone about. We were featured in Forbes, an article my family never saw because I used my middle name. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. I'd finish a call with a Fortune 500 executive, then immediately phone my mother and talk about how slow business was. I'd celebrate closing $1 million deal with my team, then text Vanessa about how I was considering getting a part-time job to make ends meet. Every conversation required careful calibration, making sure the sad story stayed consistent while my actual success grew exponentially. Simone, my college roommate and closest friend, was the only person from my old life who knew the truth. She visited Austin twice a year and couldn't believe what I was doing. "This is insane," she'd say, staring at my beautiful loft. "You're living like a spy in your own life. Why are you letting them make you feel ashamed of succeeding?" But she didn't understand the weight of family expectation, the way their doubt had burrowed into my psyche. Part of me still believed I needed to prove them wrong. Another part was terrified that if they knew the truth, they'd find some way to ruin it. The cracks started showing about 6 months before the Zoom call that would change everything. Marcus noticed it first. We were in a strategy meeting with our leadership team when my phone rang. Mom's photo flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, but Marcus saw the way my whole body tensed, the way my jaw tightened. After the meeting, he cornered me in my office. "This is getting worse," he said flatly. "You jumped during a presentation last week because Vanessa texted you. You're running 2 completely separate lives and it's starting to affect your health." I'd lost weight. I wasn't sleeping well. I had a permanent knot of anxiety in my chest that intensified every time my phone rang with a Richmond area code. The Baltimore apartment had become a prison I visited monthly. I'd fly there, take photos in different outfits to spread across social media over the coming weeks, buy groceries I'd never eat to make the fridge look lived in, then fly back to Austin feeling hollowed out. The deception had grown so elaborate it required spreadsheets. I tracked which lies I'd told to whom, which version of my life each family member believed, which details needed to stay consistent. Vanessa's success, meanwhile, had plateaued exactly where she'd always expected it to land. She'd married Brad, a nice enough guy who worked in medical device sales. They bought a house in Short Pump, the kind of suburban palace that screamed we made it to anyone driving past. She posted constantly about their life. Elaborate dinner parties, weekend getaways, the expensive handbag Brad bought for her birthday. Every post felt like an indirect jab at me, a reminder of what stable people with real jobs could afford. But I noticed things she probably didn't mean to reveal. The way she always mentioned prices, as if the cost proved the value. The forced quality of their smiles in photos. The fact that Brad often looked exhausted, like he was working overtime to fund a lifestyle they couldn't quite afford. Vanessa had achieved everything our parents wanted for her, and she seemed determined to make sure everyone knew it, especially me. The Sunday calls had become weekly torture sessions. Vanessa would spend 20 minutes talking about her accomplishments, then pivot to asking about my life with false concern that barely masked her satisfaction. Mom would sigh heavily whenever I mentioned work, as if my mere existence caused her pain. Dad would offer awkward suggestions about job openings at firms in Richmond, always temporary positions or entry-level roles, as if I were fresh out of college instead of running a multi-million-dollar company. Tyler tried to be supportive in his way. He'd text me privately after calls asking if I was okay, but he never pushed back against Vanessa or defended me to our parents. He'd mastered the art of being present without actually engaging, a skill I'd never managed to learn. "You've always been too sensitive," he told me once. "Just let Vanessa have her moment. She needs it more than you do." But it wasn't about needing moments. It was about the cumulative weight of being treated like a failure when I was anything but. It was about sitting through another lecture about financial responsibility from parents who had no idea I'd just bought investment property. It was about Vanessa explaining basic professional concepts to me like I was a child, unaware that I'd given keynote speeches on those exact topics. The breaking point almost came in October. Streamline had been selected for a major industry award. We were going to be honored at a gala in New York, the kind of event that would generate significant press coverage. My photo would be in industry publications. Our company name would be everywhere. I spent 3 sleepless nights trying to figure out how to hide it, how to accept an award for extraordinary entrepreneurial achievement while maintaining my fiction of barely scraping by. Marcus finally confronted me the day before the gala. "You're going to turn this down, aren't you?" He looked angry, really angry, which was rare for him. "You're going to reject recognition for 4 years of brutal work because you're afraid your sister will see a photo and feel bad about herself." When he said it out loud, it sounded absurd. But he was right. I was seriously considering declining the award. We went to the gala. I accepted the award. I gave a speech about perseverance and believing in your vision even when nobody else does. The irony of those words wasn't lost on me. I was talking about having confidence in yourself while literally hiding my success from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The Forbes article that came out the following week included my photo, but I'd given them my middle name and asked them to identify me as being based in Texas without specifying the city. Another layer of deception, another brick in the wall between my real life and my family. Simone called me after she saw the article. She was furious. "You're in Forbes talking about authenticity while lying to everyone who knew you before you became successful. Do you see how messed up this is? You've built something incredible and you're acting like it's shameful." I tried to explain that it wasn't shame, exactly. It was self-preservation. But even as I said it, I knew it sounded weak. The truth was, I'd convinced myself that keeping the secret was protecting me. Protecting my success from their judgment, my happiness from their skepticism, my confidence from their doubt. But the secret had become its own burden, heavier than anything they might have said. I was protecting something by slowly suffocating it, like keeping a plant alive by locking it in a closet. The week before Thanksgiving, Vanessa called unexpectedly. Not a family call, just her. She wanted to tell me about Brad's promotion before the Sunday Zoom. She was excited, genuinely happy, and for a moment we talked like we used to before everything became a competition. Then she asked about my work, and I heard that familiar edge creep into her voice. "Still doing the graphic design thing? You know, Claire, there's no shame in admitting something didn't work out. Lots of people try entrepreneurship and realize they're not cut out for it." Something inside me snapped, just for a second. I almost told her everything. The words crowded in my throat, fighting to get out. "Actually, Vanessa, I'm not a struggling freelancer. I'm a CEO. My company is worth 8 figures. I've been lying to you for 4 years because your need to feel superior is so toxic that I'd rather pretend to fail than watch you try to diminish my success." But I swallowed the words like bitter medicine and said what I always said. "Yeah, it's tough out there. But I'm hanging in." The Sunday before Thanksgiving arrived with the kind of gray Austin drizzle that always made me homesick, even for a home I'd been avoiding. I'd spent the morning at the office finishing quarterly reports, trying to distract myself from the impending family call. Tessa had left early, giving me a knowing look that said good luck without actually saying it. She'd heard enough of my stories to understand what these calls meant to me. By 5:45, I was back at my loft, laptop positioned carefully on my dining table. I'd angled the camera to show only the section of wall I'd deliberately left bare, the one corner of my beautiful home that could pass for somewhere less impressive. My backup plan, my Baltimore apartment screen capture, was ready to deploy if anyone asked for a tour. For years of this had made me an expert in visual deception. Marcus had texted me an hour earlier. Just tell them. Rip the band-aid off. What's the worst that happens? But Marcus had parents who celebrated his successes, who'd flown to Austin for our office opening, who told their friends about his company with obvious pride. He couldn't understand what it felt like to have a family that treated your dreams like character flaws. The Zoom gallery populated exactly at 6. Mom and Dad in their usual spots, sitting so formally they might have been posing for a portrait. Tyler in his car again, probably parked outside his own house, stealing 20 minutes before he had to go inside and face his own family obligations. And Vanessa, positioned perfectly in what I recognized as their redesigned home office. She'd clearly prepared for this call, hair styled, makeup applied, background arranged to showcase their lifestyle. The first 10 minutes followed the familiar script. Mom updated us on church activities and neighborhood gossip. Dad mentioned something about tax season approaching. Tyler contributed minimal responses, his attention clearly divided. Then Vanessa launched into her prepared presentation about Brad's promotion, complete with details about his new salary range, their house hunting plans, the vacation to Aruba they were booking to celebrate. I made the appropriate congratulatory sounds, playing my role perfectly. That's wonderful, Vanessa. You must be so proud. But I could see it in her eyes through the screen, that glint of satisfaction that came from having something to lord over me. She wasn't just happy about Brad's success. She was happy about the contrast it created with my supposed failure. Mom transitioned smoothly into concern mode. That's lovely, Vanessa. Your father and I are so proud. She paused for effect, that particular pause that meant she was about to say something hurtful disguised as caring. It's such a blessing to see at least one of our children settled and secure. Her eyes flickered to my square on the screen. Claire, honey, are you still managing okay? Financially, I mean. We worry about you. Before I could respond, Vanessa jumped in with that syrupy tone she used when she wanted to seem helpful while actually twisting the knife. You know, Claire, there's this great book about pivoting your career. I could send you the link. Sometimes we have to accept that our first plan didn't work out and that's okay. Some people aren't meant to be entrepreneurs. It takes a specific skill set. I felt heat rising in my chest, that familiar mixture of anger and humiliation. Vanessa knew nothing about entrepreneurship beyond what she'd seen in motivational Instagram posts. She'd never risked anything, never built anything from nothing, never stayed up until 3 a.m. solving problems that could sink an entire company. Her success was perfectly valid, but it was also perfectly safe. She'd followed every prescribed step and ended up exactly where the path was designed to lead. Thanks for the concern, I managed, my voice tight. But I'm doing fine. The graphic design work is actually picking up. I'd told that lie so many times it came out automatically, smooth as rehearsed lines in a play I'd been performing for years. Really? Vanessa leaned closer to her camera. Because I was talking to Beth Morrison, remember her from high school? She's in marketing now and she said the freelance design market is completely saturated. She said most freelancers are barely making minimum wage once you factor in taxes and equipment costs. I just worry that you're not being realistic about your prospects. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his car. Maybe we should talk about Thanksgiving plans. Who's bringing what? But Vanessa wasn't done. She'd caught the scent of blood in the water and she was circling. No, I think this is important. We're family. We should be honest with each other. She looked directly into her camera, which meant she was looking directly at me. Claire, you're 32 years old. You've been doing this freelance thing for 4 years now. If it was going to work, wouldn't it have worked by now? Don't you think it's time to consider that maybe this isn't your path? There's no shame in getting a real job. A real job. As if what I did wasn't real. As if the company I'd built, the people I employed, the clients whose businesses we transformed, all of it was somehow pretend. I opened my mouth to respond, to finally say something, anything that would push back against this narrative she'd constructed. But Mom spoke first. "Vanessa has a point, sweetheart. Your father and I have been discussing this. We think maybe you should come home for a while. Stay with us, take some time to figure out what you really want to do. There are always positions available at the community college. Administrative work, nothing glamorous, but it would give you stability while you figure things out. Come home." As if I'd been lost and needed finding. As if my life in Austin was a detour rather than a destination I'd deliberately chosen. I looked at their faces on my screen, all of them watching me with varying degrees of pity and concern. They genuinely believed they were helping. They thought they were offering rescue when they were actually offering surrender. "I need to share something with you all," I heard myself say. The words came out before I'd consciously decided to speak them. "I need to show you something." My hand moved toward my mouse, toward the screen share button. For years of secrets pressing against my chest like a physical weight. For years of letting them believe a fiction because it was easier than defending the truth. "Wait, what are you sharing?" Vanessa's voice sharpened with suspicion. But I'd already clicked the button. My fingers felt disconnected from my brain, moving on autopilot. Except I didn't select the carefully curated Baltimore apartment background I'd prepared. Instead, in my distracted emotional state, I selected my actual screen. My real desktop. The screen that populated in the Zoom call wasn't the sad Baltimore apartment I'd prepared. It was my actual desktop, and everything was visible. Multiple browser windows showing the Streamline Digital Solutions dashboard with real-time revenue tracking. An open email thread with Angela Thornton from a Fortune 500 company discussing contract renewal terms with numbers that had more zeros than Vanessa probably saw in a year. A calendar packed with meetings labeled C-Suite Strategy Session and Investor Call. And worst of all, a notification banner that slid across the top of the screen at that exact moment. Forbes reminder, interview about your Entrepreneur of the Year feature scheduled for tomorrow at 9. The silence was immediate and absolute. I watched their faces freeze in their little Zoom squares, confusion blooming into shock. Vanessa's mouth literally fell open. Mom's hand went to her chest. Dad leaned forward, squinting at the screen as if he couldn't trust what he was seeing. Tyler, for once, was paying complete attention. "What is this?" Vanessa's voice came out strange, high-pitched and thin. "Claire, what are we looking at?" My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. This wasn't how I'd planned to tell them. I'd never actually planned to tell them. But now it was done, the truth bleeding across their screens in high definition, undeniable and complete. "This is my desktop," I said quietly. "This is my actual work. My company. Streamline Digital Solutions. I'm not a struggling freelance graphic designer. I'm the co-founder and CEO. I have been for 4 years. You're a what?" Mom's voice cracked on the word. The color had drained from her face. Vanessa was clicking through the visible windows with her eyes, reading everything she could see. "Those numbers," she said. "That revenue chart. Claire, is that monthly or yearly?" "Monthly." The word fell into the call like a stone into still water. "But you said," Dad started, then stopped. "You told us you were barely making rent. You said clients were hard to find. You asked me for advice about whether you should get a part-time job." I lied. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I've been lying for 4 years. I moved to Austin, not Baltimore. I own a loft in South Congress, not a studio apartment. I have 45 employees. We just closed multiple 7-figure contracts. That Forbes notification you saw? That's real. They're interviewing me about being selected as one of their Entrepreneurs of the Year. Vanessa's face had gone through shock and landed somewhere in the territory of betrayed fury. "You've been lying to us? For 4 years?" She looked at Brad, then back at the screen. Every call, every conversation where I tried to help you, where I offered advice, where I worried about you, you were lying? Yes, I said simply. Why? Mom's voice broke on the word. Why would you do that? Why would you let us think you were struggling when you were actually successful? This was the question I'd been avoiding for years, the one I'd never wanted to answer because it required admitting uncomfortable truths about all of us. Because I knew what would happen if I told you the truth. I looked directly at Vanessa through the camera. Because you needed me to be failing. You needed to be the successful one. And I was tired of every achievement becoming a competition I never wanted to enter. That's not fair, Vanessa shot back, but her voice wavered. Isn't it? When I made honor roll, you made principal's list. When I got into VCU, you had to go to UVA on a full scholarship. When I got a good job in DC, you immediately had to find a better one. Every single thing I did well became a challenge for you to surpass. So when I moved to Austin and started building something real, something that mattered to me, I just couldn't face turning it into another thing for you to compete with. I was supporting you, Vanessa insisted. I was trying to help. You were trying to win. There's a difference. I took a breath, looking at my parents. And you both taught her to think that way. Everything was always about achievements you could brag about to your friends. Dad, you literally introduced me at parties by listing my credentials. Mom, you kept comparison charts of our grades and activities. We were never just your daughters. We were your report cards. Claire Elizabeth Patterson. Mom's use of my full name signaled how deeply I'd shaken her. We only wanted the best for you. Both of you. You wanted what looked best. What fit your definition of success. When I chose something different, you treated it like failure. Do you know how many times in the last 4 years you've asked if I wanted to come home and get a real job? As if what I was building wasn't real. As if my company, my employees, my clients, none of it mattered because it didn't fit your predetermined path. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Tyler cleared his throat. For what it's worth, he said carefully, this is completely insane and also kind of impressive. You built a multi-million-dollar company and hid it from the family for 4 years. That takes serious commitment. This isn't funny, Tyler. Vanessa's voice was sharp. She lied to all of us. She made us look like idiots. No, I made myself look like a failure to avoid dealing with your judgment. I spent 4 years pretending to struggle because it was easier than watching you try to diminish something I built with my own hands. I maintained a fake apartment I visited once a month just for photo opportunities. I turned down industry awards because I was afraid you'd see the press coverage. I'd been living 2 completely separate lives because being honest with you felt more dangerous than lying. Dangerous? Dad finally spoke up. We're your family, Claire. We would have been proud. Would you? I challenged. Really? Or would you have immediately started explaining why it wasn't as stable as you'd like, why I should have done it differently, why tech startups are risky, why I should consider a backup plan? Would Mom have stopped sighing every time I mentioned my work? Would Vanessa have celebrated with me or found ways to explain why her conventional success was somehow more valid? Nobody answered, which was an answer in itself. I don't know what happens now, I continued. I don't know if you can accept who I actually am instead of who you wanted me to be. But I'm done pretending. I'm done hiding. I built something I'm proud of, and if you can't be happy for me, then I guess we'll have to figure out what kind of relationship we can have with that truth between us. Vanessa was crying now, angry tears that she tried to hide by turning her face slightly away from the camera. You should have trusted us. You should have given us a chance. I gave you 100 chances, I said quietly. Every time you made a backhanded comment about my choices. Every time you offered advice I didn't ask for. Every time you treated my dreams like delusions. You showed me exactly what you thought of me trying something different. I just finally started believing you. The call ended badly, with no clear resolution. Mom said she needed time to process this. Dad looked shell-shocked. Tyler promised to call me later. Vanessa logged off without saying goodbye. I sat in my beautiful loft, surrounded by the evidence of my actual life, feeling exhausted and relieved and terrified all at once. Marcus called 10 minutes later. He didn't say I told you so, though he had every right to. He just asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer. I'd finally told the truth, but I'd done it in the worst possible way, accidentally and messily and without any preparation. The secret I'd been carrying for 4 years was finally gone, but I had no idea what would replace it. 3 days later, Vanessa texted. We need to talk. Actually talk. Not on a family Zoom with everyone performing. Just us. We met virtually the following week, just the two of us in a private call. She'd been crying, I could tell. Her eyes were red and she looked smaller somehow, less polished than usual. I've been thinking about what you said, she started. About the competition. About needing you to fail. She took a shaky breath. You weren't completely wrong. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd missed before. My own exhaustion reflected back at me. We've both been performing for them our whole lives, haven't we? I said. You just picked a performance they approved of and I didn't. She nodded slowly. When Brad got promoted, you know what my first thought was? Not how proud I was of him. It was how I could tell you in a way that would make sure you knew I was doing better. She wiped her eyes. That's messed up, Claire. That's really messed up. We talked for 2 hours, really talked, maybe for the first time since we were kids. We talked about growing up in a house where love felt like a competitive sport. About learning to measure our worth by external validation. About the relief and terror of finally being honest. It wasn't a complete healing. Years of damage don't disappear in one conversation. But it was a beginning. Mom and Dad came around more slowly. They visited Austin 2 months later, awkward and overwhelmed by the reality of my life. Mom cried when she saw my loft, not sad tears but complicated ones. Dad asked careful questions about the business, trying to understand something so far outside his experience. They met Marcus, toured the office, saw the life I'd built. They're still learning how to be proud of something they didn't design, but they're trying. The truth is messy and hard and sometimes it damages things that were already fragile. But it's also liberating in ways I couldn't have imagined. I don't have to maintain 2 versions of myself anymore. I don't have to curate my life for family consumption. I can just exist, successful and flawed and real. Last month, Streamline won another industry award. This time, I posted about it on social media without fear. Vanessa was one of the first to comment. Proud of you, sis. Actually proud. It's only 3 words, but they mean everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.